Moving forward now, we go to item number 9, opposition to SASS zone changes by Mary M. ND resident.
Madam Chair, if I may again, upon the advice of council, since we will hear this in a judicial quasi matter, at this time I ask that we not allow item number 8 or number 9 and number 10 be allowed to speak, since we will hear this at a later date in a judicial quasi matter.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you. I have a comment from the audience. Yes. Sorry, you don't have eyes behind your head. I should have made it clear.
I think that this commission is already going to have issues in January when this comes before you. Commissioner Tapia has stated at least 2 other meetings how she has participated at SASS events with selling food. That's a potential recusal position for her, in my opinion. Commissioner-elect Candelaria signed a letter of support for SASS. In my opinion, again, that's possibly position for recusal on his part. If you end up in those recusal positions with those 2 commission members, that leaves Mr. Freiberger standing alone. I'm extremely curious to find out what happens then. Does the matter die? Who decides it? If 2 members of this commission end up in a recusal position under governmental code of conduct and direct lack of arm's length, who on earth decides something like this? And I have one other thing. When there's discussion at the table, could you do that on the mic so that we can hear it? I noticed that you 2 were talking with each other and we couldn't hear what you were saying. Thank you.
I was asking for dates of when we put in those.
Thank you.
So that everybody knows when that happened.
Thank you.
Mr. Godey, is this in regards to this
Yes.
items 9 and 10?
I think some people showed up to talk about this issue. I think you ought to give them the time. You shouldn't use your legal maneuvering to do things that are borderline on unethical.
Thank you, sir. What is the recommendation from council?
Well, I have a recommendation. Before I get to it, do you want me to address at all the questions about how you would proceed if recusal issues arise, or would you rather I just inform you on my thoughts on these 2 items?
Whatever your pleasure is.
So regarding the questions of how you would proceed if there were potential recusal issues, which I don't think arise until the time that you're going to take the vote. It's each commissioner's pleasure as to whether or not they believe they can make a fair and impartial decision, but at the time of a vote, if a commissioner believes that they cannot make a fair or impartial decision and that commissioner recuses themselves such that there's either a tie or a lack of a majority to move forward, in order to move the application down the chain, because all of the applicants have various due process rights where they get to go to court and say if you're right or wrong. The only way to get there is by you making a decision, this board making a decision. And so there's a rule in New Mexico law known as the rule of necessity. And what the rule of necessity says is that even if there are recusal problems, if, for example, one commissioner was the lone commissioner who didn't have some contact with the item before you, the other commissioners would basically be compelled to vote to state that they think they might have internal issues, but go ahead and vote anyway so that both sides, pro and con, get the opportunity to move forward into court. So that's how it works. If it doesn't just die, it would have to go forward and end up on the court. You've got to get them so there some way. You have to have something for them to take to court. Otherwise, if it just dies, nothing ever happens. That's the answer to that question, just for people who want to know. Regarding the other issues, I did have a conversation this morning with Commissioner Freiberger and one yesterday with Ms. Ansley where I expressed at least Mr. Wallen's concern that having presentations piecemeal takes away both your opportunity to hear everything all at once and the public's opportunity to hear everything all at once, that the opposition and the movement need to appear at the public hearing. And I don't think that what you're doing is asking anybody to not speak or to not give their position, but rather that you're trying to consolidate everything to the right time and place where all sides get to hear all evidence and your vote right then and there, as opposed to sort of piecemealing it together. So that was Mr. Wallen's concern, and that's why Commissioner Freiberger and I had that conversation. And that's why our recommendation would be to wait. My understanding from Mr. Getchow this morning is that this passed P&Z with a recommendation of approve. So now it's going to come to you for your action, and you're going to hold formal meetings, or a meeting at least, on that recommendation. I think that's the time for everybody who is pro and or con to this to show up, give you their comments, and then you deliberate and make your vote. That's the only thing. It's not an attempt to stop people from speaking. It's just to consolidate the speech into one big presentation so you get to hear everything, make your decision, and move on. So that's our position, and that's why Commissioner Freiberg and I had that conversation. So,
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tapia, or Joy?
Madam Chair, I would like to make one comment. I know when I spoke with Ms. Indy yesterday, she had, her issues were more related towards the format of the planning and zoning hearing. And so I told her that I thought she would be able to express that to the commission in public comment, but she wasn't here during public comment. So I don't know if the commission would choose to hear her or not, but her issues were more towards format of the planning and zoning meeting.
if the comments were strictly limited to whether or not the format of that meeting is a good format, I think the commission could, if they wanted to, entertain an additional public comment right now in a 2-minute period, just like you could have at the beginning. You could reopen that if you want to. But I think it would have to be very, very limited to just the procedure of the P&Z hearing and not any of the content that went before. The letter that I had pulled out of your agendas earlier was a letter from Mr. Getchow telling you that it had been recommended, but not providing you anything additional. The reason I had it pulled was the same reason that I object to the comment today. I think you don't want to hear his report until that same time and place. You don't want to hear anything. So if you're going to allow any public comments on the issue, I think a comment about whether or not the P&Z board conducts its hearings appropriately would be okay. If you want to reopen it, I don't think you're required to. But I think hearing comments about the application itself are best saved for one big presentation period where everybody comes and everybody gets to hear everything. I can answer any other questions you might have on that issue.
Okay, thank you. I felt that was a very clear response. We're now at the table. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Tapia? I have no objection to hearing comment in regards to format, but I will leave that up to the commission. And how would we like to handle that request? Okay, Ms. Indy, if you'd like to come up, we'd strictly only like to hear your comment in regards to format.
Over here or?
At the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ann Andy. And in regard to the format, as you said, it was the piecemeal effect. The opposition felt that they did not get a fair hearing. We were perhaps should have, but we didn't understand that we would have like 2-minute periods to speak. So I ended up with 6, but I didn't get to present to the board what I felt were pertinent pieces of information for them before they voted. And I know we're not going back. I'm not, suggesting anything like that. So that the residents went out feeling that, we didn't like the decision granted, but we really went out feeling that we had not been heard, that our piece of the puzzle here had not been addressed to the board. We had the 2 minutes, and as you said, piecemeal. We had worked hard on presentations, and we didn't get to get it. So that was our concern, and then I decided not to, back and forth as to whether to address it. But that was a concern, so that, people feel like you could be heard, you feel better. Even if you don't get the decision you like, at least you feel like you gave it your best shot, and, the information was put forth to the board or the representatives. So the piecemeal, I thought, was a good way of putting it. 2 minutes, this is a big area, and we had a number of things we felt. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. We always appreciate comment on how we can make the residents feel better served by us, so we will certainly take that into consideration when we have any public hearings, that we make it very clear to those who are in attendance in advance how it'll be handled. So we thank you for that. And Mr. Getchell?
May I real quickly, before I forget my comments, may I
Sure.
respond to that?
Yes, please.
I think that fairness in these types of issues is important, and I certainly empathize with the public when they don't think they have the opportunity to present their side, which certainly gets back to my point. Remember that as the recommendation is simply that, it's a recommendation. When this does come before the board, my suggestion for curing that problem would be to make sure that we get out on the agenda how we intend to conduct the final decision when you actually make a formal decision, that we say, here's how much time each side is going to get, or here's how much time each individual will get, and that the people that might have felt shorted by whatever that process may have been will have full and fair opportunity to come here and address it to you. And then the recommendation is simply that. It's not a mandate. You get to say yes or no. That's why they recommend it, but you get to do what you want. And so I think that we can cure that problem by simply allowing those presentations to be made here once it's officially on the agenda. My only objection today was that today's not the agenda item day for it.
Thank you, Mr. Huss. That's very important. Yes, sir?
Steve Getchell, Planning and Zoning. In regards to Ms. Endy's comments, Mrs. Endy, or Ms. Endy, had submitted a letter to the board prior to the meeting, which did not get into the board members' packages. Also, she had submitted a petition that fully illustrated the concerns of the opposition with her signature on it, as well as Mr. Caseman's signature. Now, before the application was heard from the applicant, I addressed the board. I told them of these letters that we had received with a synopsis of their points, and then a list of the points that those letters made with the concerns of the opposition. And then the chair of the board went into recess, and sitting there at the table, they took the time to read all of those letters and the petitions and the other documents that came in from other sources before they heard the applicant give their presentation. So I believe that these allegations are unfounded, and they shouldn't have a problem with that. They, as you're aware, and there was 58 minutes of testimony just on the 2-minute time limit. And several people for and against the application had left before they had a chance to speak.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so at this time, there was a gentleman from Mountain Air had a comment, if you'd like to come forward. And then Ms. Hewitt.
Hi there. Lawrence Romero from Mountain Air. I attended the P&Z meeting, and I got to tell you, I think that there was, it seemed to me that the time was pretty well spent on the, with the SASS folks than was the other side of the thing. I have no dog in this fight. I frankly don't know much about it. I've only been in the county for almost 2 years now. But my point to you is that I think that there's obviously you have a side that feels as though they didn't get heard as well as the other side. Now I know, when the SASS folks are here, they had a presentation that lasted a good hour in terms of the screening up there. And I think that the other side at least is due that time. My impressions of what the board, how it functioned, was that it seemed to me that the board was shall we say, bogged down on road issues more so than the question at hand. And I think also that because of the people that were missing from the board, meaning that I think there was 2 vacancies at the time, that the discussion could have been heard in a better way. So my point to you is that I think that there is plenty of time to decide this issue, and those folks should be heard a little bit more.
Thank you,
Thanks.
sir. Ms. Hewitt?
Okay, having sat at that table as a P&Z member, the format of the meeting, I didn't really see a problem with that in general. The folks that were in opposition, I do my clips, they're up on the net. SASS, that was over a 4-hour meeting with recesses. SASS's presentation was the bulk of that meeting. During the for and against commentaries and questions from the table, SASS's presentation continued. They didn't stop, which is valid. Members of that body had questions of SASS, and they had asked members from SASS to answer questions from the public. But in general, that entire 4-hour plus meeting was devoted entirely to SASS, and I agree with what Brandon said. If the opposition had come in with an attorney representing them, for example, they would have said SASS got an hour and a half, we get an hour and a half. And when you've got individual members of the public that are coming before bodies, your body, planning and zoning, fair board, whatever it may be, just because they stand there individually and alone, they shouldn't be limited, in my opinion, because they are not being heard. I understand each one of you have a life beyond this meeting. So do we. We take our time and we come down here to participate in our government. Folks, for that issue or any other issue, it's hard. It presses their heart. It affects their lives. And I don't find fault at all with the format of that planning and zoning meeting. But where I do find fault is people are worried about their lunch and their personal time that are sitting on these boards, commissions, and committees. And my response to that as an individual is, you ask for the job, and so please do the job. People need to be heard. You sit in the seat of power, and by limiting people's comments, you're taking it away from them. You are not doing a good job representing, in my opinion. So that meeting, planning and zoning, I had approximately 38 minutes of, just when you got to the for and against commentary, approximately 38 minutes of members that were in support of SASS. I had 19 minutes in opposition. So out of that entire 4-hour cycle, those folks got 19 minutes. And there seems to be a huge offset to me when the bulk of those meetings goes to the guy presenting. And if it's a true hearing, give these people a chance to talk to you at your meeting. And please consider doing that. Even if you don't give 2 flips what they have to say, at least give them the respect and the honor of the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may just clarify my comment on that, I don't take a position as to whether or not the hearing was fair. I wasn't there. Only thing I was saying is that if people have that perception that it wasn't, then there's another opportunity to cure it. So I don't want to sound on record like I was saying there was anything right or wrong about the hearing. I have no position on that. I haven't reviewed it, but I don't think that 19 minutes versus a long presentation automatically means that there wasn't a fair opportunity. Maybe one just had a full presentation and the other were sort of limited comments. There's many things that could explain that. I just think that when it comes before you, it would be relatively easy for us to ensure that everybody gets the option to be heard.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Steve?
Just to address, I mean, it's not a question of the massive time that these people are talking about. They had 2 minutes to speak, and then if they wanted to cede their time to somebody else, they could. As Ms. Endy told you, she spoke for several minutes. Another member of the opposition spoke for 10 minutes. There was only 5 of those people that were opposed to the application that did come up to the podium to testify. The others either left or decided not to speak.
Thank you. I don't think we should have anything further on this particular item. Cody? This will be the last comment, and we've made our decision how we'd like to proceed, so after this, we will move forward.
Of course, doing the math and the number of people that wanted to speak, if you're going to see your time, it was about 9. Just to point that out. The other thing is you could do in this, and I've noticed that, whoever's giving a presentation, they have the inside lane because they're giving the presentation. Could it be possible that the people that oppose SASS can also give and have equal time to do a organized presentation where two of them can stand up and spend an hour giving a presentation too, rather than having it just one way, because it's an inside track. You're giving SASS, just like the Flying J had the inside track at their meeting, rather than giving these people, which were a lot of people, a chance to give their own and organize their own presentation. Could you do it both ways?
Okay, thank you. That's something to take into consideration. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for being here. So at this time, I'd like to call for a motion to table items 9 and 10.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Just a moment.
Can I ask a question? If we table them, they're going to appear on the next agenda, and we're not going to hear this matter until January with the public hearing. So do we want to table it, or do we not want to not take action on it and have them speak at the public hearing?
I think we should do the latter. I think we should,
Not take
for
action.
lack of a better word, deny speaking at this time until we have the hearing, the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Joy. Thank you, Commissioner. What does council have to say?
I guess my recommendation would be to, as far as legally what your response will be, is to, I would table it until the public hearing would be the way I would proceed.
So then it wouldn't reappear on the agenda?
Correct, until the public meeting, and then it would reappear as opposition, and then they can speak at that time.
Okay, Commissioner, would you like to amend your motion?
Yes. I amend it to table items 9 and 10 until the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion does now pass.